The next meeting, which will be Sunday, I want to go into our material around listening. And I guess there's something else in what I'm, what we're calling the credo that's about, we are here to share this particular material and see how it applies. It's more than it's more than just a discussion group or even a counseling group. It's focused on this particular material. Okay. So I want to go into the part of the work today, which I think is a particular combination of me and David Pellin. He had the original idea, which is very original in my view. Why don't I just pause a minute and the people who just came in can do their sharing name and place, I guess. So, Nikki, do you want to?
Hi, thank you. Sorry I'm late. Nikki, I'm in Wimbledon. Just came back from my walk because it finally stopped raining today.
Okay. Shelley?
Hi, I'm Shelley. I'm in Woodland Hills, California.
Okay. Victoria?
Hi, I'm Victoria and I'm in Paris, France, and it's raining here after 7 weeks of no rain, and it's a thunderstorm, so I might disappear without knowing it. So I'm sorry about that, and it's wonderful to have a rain here.
Yeah. Yeah, so the part of the material I want to look at today is called the persona gap. It is relatively new, like 10 years. In some ways, it's the hardest part of this work. Long time ago, it was called the self-identity and self-identity feedback exercise. And the concept of self-identity is David Pellin's. The concept of the persona gap is mine. What the persona gap is in a way, it's quite simple. It's the difference or the gap between my perception and other people's perception of me. And that's a quite simple definition. When we're using advisors, Cease?
I was wondering if you could spell that for me, personographic.
Persona gap, yeah. Persona, P-E-R-S-O-N-A. And the next word is gap, G-A-P-E. I guess the reception's a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I didn't.
Yeah, persona gap.
Gap, Peter, not gape. G-A-P.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. My typo.
And not Gabe.
Exactly.
No. Okay, gap as in, distance.
As in mind the gap.
Yeah,
The gap, right.
Yeah, mind the gap. And I guess, that could be a useful rift on this, mind the gap, because the persona gap surprisingly, with a great almost accuracy and pinpointing, really points us to things in our life that we need to look at, and in the main we do not want to look at. Okay, so what I'm presenting with the persona gap here today is a tool, a cognitive tool, an idea that I guess sort of today I'm almost presenting it just as a theoretical idea almost. You know, we'll look at it and we can come up with examples. It's quite ruthless and tough because the way we see ourselves and the way other people see us is very, very different. I can see myself as, to give an example, I'm a caring person, I'm a good listener, and I do my work well, but the perception I may get from somebody else, you know, is you spend a lot of time looking out the window and making lists, and I don't think the lists are necessarily about me. You know, you're distracted. I don't think I'm distracted, someone else is telling me I am. And within that, there'll be a whole sort of hub of work. There'll be a whole almost nest of work to do. So presenting it in this, you know, and it's usually sort of done in a group, and while it's relatively new, the exercises and the part of the part of this work that is, you know, training people to be practitioners, you know, is done in group settings with very rigorous directions about listening and how it's done and how it's done in a way that doesn't hurt people. It's very nice, it's very neat, that which I'm very proud. It's a very neat concept. It's literally my perceptions of me, your perceptions of me, and what's the difference between them. Yeah, Mary.
I'm afraid the playwright in me is bursting to say this. I thought of this consciously as dramatizing the value of hard feedback in my recent one-woman show, the first show I've ever written, and it's called From Crazy to Sane Nor Am I, and it celebrates how contribution training and Peter's work was a huge part of me getting better from bipolar disorder, so-called, without ever taking drugs. And I have a scene where in the section where I've taught the pendulum on stage, and I have a scene where there's recorded voices going, "Oh, Mary, stop interrupting me. You never listen." Things like that. Just 4 things people say to me over the thing. And I say, "Oh, but surely I'm so much more charming when I come out of my depression." And then you replay the same, "Stop interrupting, Mary, can't you shut up for a moment" thing. And I go, people keep saying the same things. Perhaps I better take notice if I'm going to change and get better. So I just realized when you were talking, that was very much persona gap, not just the value of hard feedback.
Yeah, hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, Peter. Hey, Peter.
Hi.
Wait, I got to unmute.
No, we could hear you, Elizabeth. Now you've muted yourself. This is Mary speaking.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
There you go.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I'm sorry to be late. It just dawned on me. So
That's okay. There's no picture. Is that deliberate, Elizabeth?
That is me combing my hair, Peter.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay,
Um,
I'll put the video on in just a second. Just got to comb my
Yeah.
hair, dear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just to.
Peter, Victoria's trying to say something.
Yeah, I know. Let me just
sorry.
sort of,
Sorry,
yeah.
son.
Yeah, I'm teaching, Elizabeth, I'm teaching what's called the persona gap, which is essentially a new formulation of what used to be self-identity and self-identity feedback and self-identity feedback exercise way back
Gotcha.
when.
Okay.
Just filling you in.
Yep. Thank you.
Victoria.
Well, I have a question, or sort of sharing about this. We have fixed beliefs of what we are, but if we start some sort of work, not on ourselves, but with ourselves, so I try to actually get rid of these fixed beliefs of who I am and just open them. So my question is, how does this persona gap of what you've just presented, it's my view of myself, which is also changeable. So what is this view of yourself that you mentioned? Is it,
Well,
and then one day, like I have my core belief that I'm smart, and sometimes I think that people love me because I'm smart, and then I say, well, I'm not smart, and what if I just become foolish? Would people still? And this is, I just try to understand, what is it? Is it core belief of what we are, or is it, what is it? Exactly the way we see ourselves today, or how we react, or how
yeah, I
we
guess
I
in a
just try
sense,
to
all of that, okay? If I go and bear with this repetition, okay? But they're simple tools. The example I give of, you can Google Michelangelo's tools and they come up. They're these sort of simple tools. So in a sense, what I now call the persona gap is a simple tool. It's the difference between my perception of myself and other people's perception of me. And within that gap, within that difference, my particular issues that I need to work on are located. So that's the tool, okay? I'm just sort of putting it out. Then how you take it, what does it mean? This is my perception of myself. That can be fluid, that can be, well, just on one level, it could be short-term or long-term. My perception of myself today, which is a bit pleased with my historical knowledge of the American Civil Rights Movement, okay? More than pleased with it. That's my perception of myself today. It's sort of, a man who has, at my time of my life, has a particular relationship with a country that's called America. And it's quite an unusual relationship. So that's a bit of me I'm into today, okay? There could be another bit of me with my kids, my family, or how I see myself overall. So it's almost, it could be, what I'm saying, it could be anything. That's why the whole methodology of tools is so fundamental. And so it's quite subtle. It's not a formula. It's just, how can you use this tool in this particular situation? So answering your question, it could be any part of me I want it to be, but then what are other people's perceptions of that part of me? Okay. And just to, Mary.
Well, I'm just remembering that David Pellin's conception of self-identity is very simple, and I think it might help. You can't know, I can know me from the inside. I cannot know me from the outside, which was the point of that bit in the play. I really believed I was charming and vivacious and lovely when I was manic. And I wasn't at all. I was a big pain in the neck. So that's a huge gap, the difference between how I experienced myself.
Yeah, let me put that bit in, because that's where it started. I think I made it simpler with the persona gap. Yeah, just simpler to teach. David's, and those of you who might be new, when I talk about David, I'm always talking about David Pellin, the man I studied with, who came up with all this material. He had the concept of self-identity, okay? And as Mary just said, self-identity is the part of us that other people can see that we can't. And what he was saying, and that's got particular sort of, a lot of his work is stunningly original. And this particular concept is, I think, stunningly original. So there's a part of me that I can know, the part of me I cannot know, the part of me I cannot know is my self-identity, in his words. And one of the ways to see that is, well, we've got this. I'm familiar with myself here because we're doing this a lot. This is number 9, I think, if I'm right, of these forums. But even so, there's a familiarity with my image on the screen and my voice that you will have that I won't have. If we are in a group with 8 people, whether we know them or don't know them, and that was videoed, we'd have a familiarity with all those people in the room, how they come across, how they speak, how they appear, that we would not have. And there'd be one person in that room who'd be a stranger to us, and that's ourselves. We are our own image, our own voice is often a stranger to us. That's where this material started, his concept of self-identity. Couple of examples of it. It's quite a dense, complex concept, as a lot of his stuff is. And that's why I use as you know, I use the Michelangelo example, and then I say, then Google Pietas and Peters. He produced that with those. David, in a similar way, his concept of self-identity is quite simple and straightforward. But when you start actually picking up the tool and doing something with it, it's quite complex. But it touches on, self-identity touches on this sort of thing that if someone goes around being consciously beautiful, they'll lose something. They'll lose some of their beauty in being conscious of their beauty. If someone's consciously wise, they end up being a bore. Because those things have to be seen by other people, but not seen by ourselves. There's some of the examples of it. I've sort of, and a lot of David's work is like that. You can't do it quickly. And I've developed the work so you not only can do it quickly, you can teach it to kids. I've got that. We've got that with this material. And even something as hard as this, the persona gap, I can teach that to kids, and I can teach that to kids in a way that's fun. It could be a game on their phones if we went that distance. But it can be a way my ambition there is that the Pellin tools, with all their sophistication and all their power, and some of you, and thank you for being here, you know, that you recognize the depth of this work over decades of your own professional work. And we got all that, but at the same time, now we've got it down, so much of it down, we can take the same thing and teach it to kids. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all. Thank you for inviting me. One of the most valuable things that that I learned really over a very long period of time from your tool and David's tool of self-identity is the fluidity of self-identity, how fluid that is, how it is not a fixed object, how once you begin working with this tool, you have a sense of that initially you say, okay, this is, no one can see me as I see myself. That's absolutely true. When I attempt to put forth an image of myself, that's another kind of identity that's not the same as someone else observing me. And the identity that I have within a one-to-one relationship or a group relationship is always going to be unique to that moment. And that concept, which, you don't, I have never heard you specifically articulate the fluidity of self-identity, but you definitely teach that, okay? That definitely comes across in how you present the material, that identity is fluid. And and so that actually opens up why people can work with you. People can work with you because they don't feel trapped any longer within a fixed self-identity. Once they have observed how a self-identity tool works, they're then able to see the freedom in that tool. And that freedom comes from the fact that when you work with people in a group, Peter, or one-on-one, you open the door to that self-identity being processed in a new way, or in a way that had not been considered before. And so, as from other teachers, when I encountered the concept of interdependence, okay, this made, I was already there, right? Because he gave me that other tool, right? And so interdependence permits the freedom to change and to modify and to grow the concept of how one sees oneself.
Thanks.
You do it. I'll tell you, you did it. You got it from me, honey.
Okay. See.
So what I'm getting with that, if somebody comes in, or we're talking to anybody who has a fixed idea of the kind of person they are, that's kind of trapping them in that identity. And so letting them know that there's different ways, I don't know if I'm saying this right, different ways their identity could be expressed, or that they have different ways of being or different characteristics, that could help them shift perhaps a very negative identity about themselves to, I guess you would call it more fluid or more variable. So they might be different in different situations and not feel like I'm a borderline, that I'm, this all the time. Am I on the right track here?
Oh, no, you're absolutely on the right track. One of the ways that this concept first grabbed me, when I first met David Pellin, and, we're going back 6 decades, this was there are a few, because I didn't like him at first, but this was one of the things that struck me when he taught this particular concept, because what it means, you know, in our professional lives, with the concept of his concepts of self-identity, which I've sort of turned into the persona gap, a social worker, a therapist, a lawyer, you know, and a school teacher, you know, cannot say, I know how my patients see me, I know how my clients see me. You just can't say it. It doesn't make any sense. Because if you get inside his concept of self-identity, which is, you know, quite a sort of magnificent, really complex idea, you can't say, I know how, oh, I'm doing these forums, I know how they see me. No, you can't say that. Because that's the persona gap. I have an idea of how my clients or my patients or my pupils see me, but I can't be sure of it until I get feedback from them, and that touches on advisors. Yeah, Elizabeth in Vegas.
Eugene.
Eugene, sorry. Who's
Um,
in Vegas?
no,
Can't
I
remember.
forgot.
Stacy couldn't come
Ah,
today, and
yes,
it's
yes.
Stacy.
Sorry. So we've got Elizabeth in Vegas and Elizabeth in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
No, she's called Stacy.
Sorry.
The person in Las Vegas is called Stacy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I know. I was just saying, we got two Elizabeths and we got two
Yes.
Marys. Elizabeth, yeah.
I have a question about the persona gap. Is it always a negative one?
No. No, I mean, we didn't set it up. But what Elizabeth just gave me was all the sort of positive side of the persona gap. You know, I see myself, I realize I'm slow, I can't quite find words, and then someone comes in and says, hey, you do a good job. Yeah.
I was thinking of
So
an interest. Oh, sorry.
It's all of it. So it's positive and negative. If I can just say that with a minute, the positive one also will point to work we need to do. You know, come on, Peter Fleming, listen to that feedback. Elizabeth Hurwood just gave you, and listen to it for a while. And that opens up a whole lot of stuff about my work. I mean, my work, my ambition, you know, my dreams, just from that bit of engagement. So it can be absolutely positive as well as negative. But it still points to fundamental stuff. Yes, Mary.
Oh, I just wanted to say, when I worked in a community mental health center, I was very struck when the clients, you know, technically Axis 1 disorders, they said to me, one person, but the others agreed, said to me, as soon as I walk in a room with a psychiatrist, I know whether he gives a damn about me or not, or whether he couldn't care less.
It's interesting you said that, because I don't know why it struck me, but you know, when you watch news programs, there's some item that comes up sort of week after week after week almost. Airline stewardesses say the same thing. They know within 30 seconds whether someone's going to be difficult or not. Mm-hmm. Just a little new thing that kept popping up on my news program. Victoria.
Well, I remember when it was called self-identity years ago, you said something that really touched me, and it's about the unconscious contribution from our unknown to us, nevertheless, self-identity. Because when we know what we communicate it with our voice, with whatever tools we have to communicate directly. But when we do not know it as it's unconscious, it's the perception of the other, this is probably where the most magic happens, because this is how, you know, this persona gap manifests itself. And there's one thing I just want to say now, in the time of so many Zoom sessions, I sometimes just take the screenshots to see myself after that, because I look like in the mirror, and then my daughter tells me how wonderful I am, and then I take a, you know, screenshot, and I think, gosh, this is all true. Is this me? And then I think, well, but the others maybe, and these are all the, like, the layers of the obvious visual self-identity, also transformed by the Zoom camera, mirror, the way we perceive ourselves, others perceive ourselves, and we would love to be perceived. So my question here is it possible to, like, the way we would love to be perceived, can we add something consciously to the way we would love to be perceived, to our self-identity or persona gap?
Oh, yes, it's called, I guess it's called a few things. It's called being a teenager. It's called looking after yourself when you're in your 80s. Yeah, it's going to the gym. You know, we do look after our image in the world in a lot of different ways, okay? And that's part of it. And one of the things I really want to be careful of here is, you know, because over these 9 weeks I've introduced a ton of material, and I do want to try and keep it sort of simple and straightforward at this time. So in a sense, we work on our persona gap a lot, because we speculate what someone else will think of us, and then we, you know, dress up for it. We're careful how we present ourselves. We're careful about, you know, that we are present somewhere, so we want to say something, or careful that we, like, you know, keep our statements brief if we're someone who talks a lot. So all of those things, we are, you know, working on how are we present in the world, how do we connect to the world, how do we connect to the people we're around. If you go back, you know, a few weeks, I will find a way. I'm working on a way to make the material easy to remember. I guess that's one way to say it. But when we were talking about callousing, okay, remember you know, if we hurt someone, if they hurt us, if we hurt ourselves, we callous to the fact we are hurting. Now, there's a real link. By the way, Elizabeth, there's a positive and negative calluses. Calluses just aren't all negative. You know, at times, yeah, if we can't go out because we're locked down, we've got to, and it's sort of hurtful, we've got to develop some calluses around that and not spend every, you know, moment of the day thinking about, you know, what would it be like to be out in Starbucks. You know, we've got to sort of callous that out to survive lockdown. Just an example of calluses there. But one way you can see, you know, the gap between our perception of ourselves and other people's perceptions of us. You know, a couple that get in the habit of taking shots at each other, and then the shots they take at each other are a bit nasty. They've got a bit of a sharp edge to them, okay? that's a callus, okay? And yeah, mum and dad who do that. And the kids, you know, they can do that again. You know, the kids can see it. The kids may want to say something about it, but they see it. Well, no, we're, you know, we love each other, and, you know, mum and dad love each other. You don't need to worry about it. Wait a minute, you're really sarcastic to him. You know, you make sarcastic cracks. Almost every time he makes dinner, you make a sarcastic crack at him, Mum. No, I'm not like that. We love each other. You know, that's a persona gap. You know, the persona gap is a couple who've got into the habit of sort of saying slightly nasty things to each other, have callous to it so they can keep going, maintain it. But those sort of habits tend to grow up like a substance abuse addiction. You can't keep it stable. It's got to grow up. It's got to go up. And you know that sort of thing can drive the kids away when they're in their 20s. I don't quite know why, but I don't want to visit mum and dad. And the persona gap is saying, you know, you cannot know how you are unless you look at how other people perceive you as well as how you perceive yourself. Elizabeth.
This is great. Okay, this is great. And so this is tying together something that I really didn't see before in your work, okay? And that is these concepts revolve around how do you cut your self-defense of how you see yourself, okay, in communication with other people, enough to be able to choose differently. And in your hot seat work, and I don't even know if you're still doing hot seat work with people, but if you are, hot seat work really presents the opportunity for people to drop their self-defense around how they usually see themselves and what they see themselves defending, okay, long enough to explore the idea of something else could happen. Something else could happen. That's you know, your hot seat work is what really opens the door for people to say, oh, that was that other aspect of me. Oh, it's on the chair over there, you know, and you enter into dialogue with it. It breaks down that fixed, gripping sense of, oh no, this is who I am. I have to defend that self-perception. I don't know how to actually shift my self-perception, but that hot seat work, that really opens the door. So, because then you know, at the end of a hot seat work, you don't know what the hell's going on. You know, you don't know. You know why? Because your usual forms of self-defense, protecting that sense of who you think you are, have been basically for a minute, they've been ameliorated. Okay, they're no longer there for that little special moment. And you do more and more hot seat work with someone, guess what? It shifts every single time. It shifts, you know. And if I hadn't done like a lot of hot seat work with you, I can tell you, I would I would still be in Mount Clemens, Michigan. That's for sure. I would still be there. I wanted to share what, Peter, you know this, but when I was 48, I found my birth family. I was adopted when I was about 6 months old. And one of the most stunning things about that process of finding my birth family was learning their stories about who they thought I was. They thought I'd been adopted by someone in California, that I grew up in Los Angeles. I mean, they had a whole story, right? A whole story. And that wasn't my story, right? I mean, I grew up in Michigan, right? But that experience meant something to me because I could look at it and not feel defensive. I mean, sometimes I felt defensive about it, like, you don't really know me, but there were moments where I did not feel defensive. And that's because of the hot seat work, okay? That hot seat work permitted that opening to happen, okay? Just for a little while, you know? So that's what I had to share.
Gail?
Are you there? Are you there?
No, sound, Gail.
Oh, the sound went out? Oh, oh well.
Gail, you need to unmute yourself if you're trying to say something,
Unmute yourself at the top.
or the bottom, depending on what you're on.
Got it.
The iPad.
There you go.
Okay,
It's
getting,
that-
are you saying, Elizabeth, hot seat?
Yes.
Is that the word you're using, hot seat? So when you do chair work, you refer
Yeah,
to
chair work is hot seat work. Yeah. Sorry.
I wasn't sure. I thought so. Then I thought maybe it was a Native American term.
Hell no.
No.
It's,
hearing
No,
you.
let me, no, it's not a Native American term, but it is a
Great.
very much a Southern California term.
It's a Fritz
Yeah.
Perls term.
Yeah.
It's the word, and when I first did this work, I called it hot seat work,
Right.
because that's what Fitz Perls called it. He was the person I studied with, and we now call it chair work or Pellin chair work,
Sorry.
Right.
because it's not so threatening. And it started on, just to put some of the history in, which I very much, as some of you might know, I'm doing a lot in my Facebook posts.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Pellin's history, a lot of what I call their lineage. Fritz Perls took the term hot seat work from a group called Synanon, who did work with heroin addicts in California. They might have been in Oregon, I can't remember. They're certainly on the West Coast. And they were one of those sort of charismatic based, absolutely brilliant groups. Did terrific work with heroin addicts. We brought some of that a couple of us brought some of that program to Vancouver, the Synanon program. Like some of those sort of charismatic leader, it went all wrong. Famously wrong, you know, there was a rattlesnake murder,
Right.
which is pretty wrong. But they developed the thing about hot seat work, and it was sort of very threatening, and it worked and Fritz Perls took that and developed it into something else. But I took it and I took his work and developed it into something else. So anyway, so that's a history of, it was once called hot seat work and it's not called hot seat work anymore.
That's great.
And yeah, and do pick it up where I'm not putting in enough of the basics, okay? Because, you know, it's, yeah, if we go back to the pendulum, you remember the swings to highs and lows. Yeah, I can get pretty high on students from 45 years ago. Okay, yeah. Elizabeth.
Quick question. What is chair work?
Well, that's what we're saying. Oh, yeah, what it is. It is a form of therapy. I put in that background, that bit of history. And it's called chair work because we have two chairs, okay? And in one chair, I'm one part of myself, okay? In another chair, I'm another part of myself. And it's a way to have a certain internal dialogue, okay? Yeah, in this chair, I'm the Peter who got that feedback from Elizabeth, okay? You know, it's sort of, on the one hand, very positive, but on the other hand, going back many, many, many years, more than 45. So that's here, okay? And then this should be turned sort of that way. So here, you know, I'm the Peter who just got some really good feedback, and you know, I can remember, you know, I can literally remember when Elizabeth arrived in my place in Italy. So that's in this chair. That's that Peter. You know, history and confidence. But then in the other chair, so I'd move, okay, and I'd sit in this chair, and I'm the Peter who, you know, why can't you speed up? You can't get the words out of your mouth. You're not doing this as well as you could. And I could go on and on about that, okay. So then these two have a dialogue. You know, maybe I'm saying to him, you know, I need you. And maybe he's saying to me, oops, he's the confident one is saying to me, to him, you know, just relax a bit, you know, just relax, okay, it'll come out. If you relax, it'll come out of your mouth. That's what I want to say to him. So, so that's a whole lot of the work. How we incorporate that into this. But what two-chair work is, it's called Gestalt therapy. That's where it came from. And you can use, you can Google Gestalt therapy and a bunch of stuff will come up. And one of the ways, and it's relevant to this, I believe chair work, as we now call it, used to be called hot seat work. I don't know anything else that can uncover our own self-knowledge about ourselves as much as this thing we call chair work. It's a, you know, it's a whole particular school of psychotherapy called Gestalt therapy. Mary.
I just wanted to say to Elizabeth, you know, times like when you feel overwhelmed and you're feeling anxious about something, and I encourage a kind of separation between the part of you that feels like that and remind you about your grown-up self who's going to have a different perspective when we talk about that. That's really doing chair work over the telephone, because then when you experience, when you kind of remember the side of you that's not overwhelmed, then you feel less overwhelmed. It's like I just thought that might clarify for you. It's amazing having the chairs there. You know, the first time you sit, I know Elizabeth's going to agree with this, the first time you sit in another chair and you find a part of yourself you didn't even know existed, and you get off the chair and you're going, oh, wait a minute, where am I? I don't know who I am anymore. It's like, it's just, for me, it's amazing. But it's very difficult to get quite that visceral experience without physically moving chairs.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning of this session about the persona gap, you know, this is really tough work, okay? And, you know, we do a lot of it in groups and training courses, and we go on for months and years. You know, what I want to do here is find ways to present it in a fairly straightforward, clear way, okay? You know, my aim here is clarity. So, but so, you know, I don't know how to develop some of the more demanding and subtle and long-term parts of this work in this medium. But, you know, that's something we can develop. You know, we're doing pretty well over 4.5 weeks. Yeah, Mary.
Well, I just, this is from a bit back in the conversation, but I just flashed into my mind an example of persona gap from my very first time in Italy, which was around 76, I think, 1976. And I had a lot of extreme pendulum swings. So I was very full of myself when I was overexcited, and I was very absorbed in myself when I was completely depressed. And both Peter and Ken Winter, who was there that time, saw that I had a lot of caring life force. And I was like 99.9% frozen on my caring life force. I had the biggest callus, maybe not quite that much, but I had the biggest callus on my caring life force because I'd been so rejected and all the other stuff I was hiding from. But the persona gap was such, and it'd be interesting if Peter remembers anything about that, because I have no idea how that came across. I was completely self-absorbed, self-centered, selfish person at that time in my life. And they both saw that I had this caring. And that changed I really can't imagine where my life would be if I hadn't learned the pendulum. But also, if no one had seen that caring, which is like, it really is the biggest part of me, I would have had a very destructive, self-sabotaging life. I have no question, there's no question about that, if I hadn't come across Peter and this material. That's it.
Yeah, Victoria.
Well, it's 8 o'clock here. They're applauding without me.
You got to go.
No, I just wanted to say something about this chair work and as a Gestalt therapy method, but there's also things that I use when I work. This is sort of like, how would I call it? It's like sub-personalities, or it's from the internal family therapy by Schwartz. And this is when it's just not two personalities physically representing on the chair, but many others. So what I do, I ask my clients to even name them and put them all on the stage. So there are many personalities, not just two. And that is why it's very interesting for me, this gap, persona gap you're describing now, because like there's so many of them. It's just the one who presents them all. This is the person, so to say, and then there are many others, and but they all are parts of yourself. So it's not just two chair. There are many of them, one depending on what's happening. And this is like this internal family, which is all yourself.
And again, these are tools, you know, and chair work, as we now call it, is a tool that gets at some of that. Do you want to come in, Nikki? Because you don't have a chance to wave your hand.
No, I haven't got anything particular to say. And also I need to hang up and call right back. So
Okay.
I'll be back in a minute. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Gail.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I was thinking about what you were talking about earlier with the children that see the parents, you know, going at each other, you know, and how they don't want to be around as they get older in their 20s. They don't really want to be around mom. They don't like what, you know, they don't like what they saw, let's put it that way. And I really identified with that because on one hand, I really loved being around my parents, but on another hand, I mean, I thought they were the greatest thing, you know, but then on the other hand, I didn't really like my mother. You know, I didn't like the way that she treated my father, you know, and that was really clear to me when you were talking about, and what was the concept that you were doing then? Was it self-identity? I'm not sure. I can't remember what you were talking about that came up, you know, the comparison but
callousing, Gail.
oh, callousing. Okay, so that's perfect. So what I did was I left New York and moved to California because I didn't want to be around that anymore because it was so painful. But the thing that I have found in my life is that you really could never leave the past. I mean, you could physically leave, but it's still part of your identity, at least with me.
Oh yeah, oh totally.
Really part.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I think that it's always there. Were you in the session where I taught what's called memory links?
Well, I've heard you talk about that, but I wasn't in that session. No.
No, you weren't in that session. Anyway, memory links is our past.
Yeah.
That used to be called referrals. Because, because something. So, yeah, and it's always with us, okay? And I think one of the things that when we get into persona gap, which we can only do by getting feedback from other people, like advisors, a whole lot of it is about our past.
Yeah.
I mean, what came up here for me is I got a bit of feedback about my self-identity, very positive feedback about my self-identity. Now, if I can hold on to that without going into one of my sort of pushing away cute numbers that I do with positive feedback, that's me. Then, that's a bit of my past, way back, because I was just doing numbers in my head, and I think it was 73 or 74. I think it was 73. And I could remember that vividly, because I was in this rather remote part of southern Italy. The taxi drives up. This young woman, quite young, sort of jumps out and says, "I'm Betsy Wetzel, and I'm here to help you get your writing together." Okay. Betsy Wetzel is now Elizabeth on the screen.
I had a feeling.
So I sort of went way. I mean, I could literally see the taxi coming up the drive. So I thought, I'm not expecting anybody. So, and that happens, and then where is my? Because just to come back to the persona gap, because I want to have what Mary last week called the repetition that makes this work, makes this work effective. I'm sort of, where's my past? Long time ago, a lot of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Wait a minute. All of a sudden you're located in your past. So that's where it's a simple tool, but here is this, because I'm not feeling great today. I'm feeling sort of flat. I didn't get stuff done. I didn't call someone I could have called, blah, blah, blah. Sort of, going low on the pendulum, escaping into reading, which you talked about, Mary, the other time. And it's a thick book. I can really escape it. And then, I get this sort of piece of feedback. So, and then I guess what the persona gap does is raise issues for us. It raises questions for us. And I guess calling it the persona gap and calling chair work which is one of the ways we do that. And given that people coming onto the forum who know my work talk quite a bit about chair work, I'll make that the topic for next Sunday, okay? And I'll do a demonstration of it. And then we could see what we could do with it in this format, given all the ground rules, safety and confidentiality and everything else. But, you know, I think your perception of me, my perception of myself, and that will raise issues. Now, someone might decide they don't want to look at those issues. Well, that's all right. But if someone really wants to look at the issues that are going to be important in their life, this is a good tool. Let me be careful to bring in other people. Shelley, do you want to comment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I know what chair work is, so
Yeah.
I saw a really good demonstration of it on a video with another type of therapy called emotionally focused therapy, right? So it's used a lot, and they did it with a master level student, and they showed her sort of inner, it's going to sound like a little bit like voice dialogue, but her inner critic, right? Her inner critic criticizing her for not being more accomplished and not getting enough done and not treating her son well, blah, 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 blah. And then her other self, you know, trying to have this and just learn how to respond back to the angry critic. And it was very powerful, you know, it was just amazing with her.
No, it is. It's very powerful.
Emotional reaction to herself. It was, you know, stunning.
Yeah.
So,
Do you want to just, Nikki, bring you?
can I interrupt myself? But when you were
Sorry.
talking about how other people perceive you, though, that seems like very different than the chair work when you're working with your inner self. But it seems like one of the things that you would be getting out of the persona gap is being able to modify or view yourself a little differently with some, you know, love and acceptance from the viewpoint of another, helping you to get there. Is that part of it? Does that make sense?
Cynthia, do you want to come in?
Sure. I've been taking in a lot of what you say. I have to admit, when I first heard the topic, I had read about on the Facebook thing about the persona gap, and when I first read the topic, I'm like, oh yuck, who wants to do that?
Exactly. It's very, yeah. You could say it's nasty, it's bad. You're right. You're absolutely right about it. You know, if you take, I mean, just, you know, if you take it elsewhere,
Oh dear, I think you
of your
froze.
country or the prime minister of theirs,
Mm-hmm.
his perception of himself and other people's perception of him, yeah, it's hard stuff. Go on.
But there was a lot of things that come, like one of them as an astrologer, I do see the complexity of people in it, because you have, you're looking at many different parts. It's more than just your sun sign, but and you do actually, but I think that's not quite the same thing. So I've had to sort of turn off that inner part to listen and to be paying attention to in this context. I mean, there's parallels, but a couple, just a few little things that came to mind just sort of popped in. I don't know. When I used to be a divorce lawyer, like one of the examples of this was you get this person who the judge says they have to go to anger management or something like that, and then they'd be screaming at me, what do you mean I have to go to anger management class? I don't have an anger management problem. Screaming loudly, sometimes with swear words. But I also think about how it must be valuable, because nowadays everybody, like all companies and marketings, they're constantly bothering you. In fact, it drives me crazy. You know, they're constantly, oh, what was your experience with this project? Did it meet your expectations? Did this? And they want you to review everything. And you know, and now I do freelance. There's this thing where, you know, you always have to rate each other, and I don't know if I like it or not, but it must be valuable if marketing groups and businesses seek it out. So
Yeah, yeah.
those were my few things to say. Thank you.
Cease?
Yeah, thank you. I think I've done psychodrama for probably 20 some years. So that has a lot of this, what people have been talking about. You can have a dialogue with yourself from years ago or present or the future, and also dialogue with your parents from different time periods. So, and you switch, and because you change places, you get to take a different viewpoint of not only them, but yourself. So I've used that and Gestalt a lot. One thing that this reminded me of, though, was the, I've forgotten the name of it, Johari's Window. Are people familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a
Goes
nice,
back a long way. Yeah.
and it helped years ago when I was working in Rwanda and Burundi, when we were trying to help people understand about trauma and what there was part of it what they know about themselves, but then what other people were seeing about them, and then and especially what was unknown to everybody, but that might be coming out in symptoms, and so that was another expression of themselves. So that kind of 4-part thing was very significant to them, and so I like to use that tool as well, the Johari's Window. It also helps people understand, I think, how some of these things are, like people were talking about, suppressed, and then it comes out in different ways in their daily life. And what is that saying to them? What needs to be addressed? I think that's a good tool if you try to use it.
Yeah, I think there's something about the tools I like to, and it was true of David's work, sort of see it in a wider context, you know, so you can apply it to politicians, or you can apply it to sports personalities or people you know. And I mean, at times, the persona gap, in a whole lot of areas, I mean, you're quite right, Cynthia. It's hard stuff to do. It's not easy. But, you know, if people have, you know, we could choose a political figure who was failing, not mentioning name, and think, you know, what it would be like for them to take in that, hey, other people's perceptions of you are important, and the difference between your perception of yourself and other people's perception of you might save your career. It's sort of really there. Nikki, do you want to come in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just now I was thinking about how years ago when I first came on the program in Italy, I just suddenly dimly remembering how having the experience of like you do some work. I mean, this wasn't for the purpose of sort of self-identity feedback, but you'd do some work and then everybody would give you feedback on what it was. And just me noticing, you know, the first person said something and then the next one, and then 6 in a row would say something with the same thing in. And I remember having this revelation of, well, I know they haven't discussed that. So
They're not ganging up on me.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't secretly vanished from the room and gone and, you know, so there must, because the first 1 or 2, I just thought, oh no, there's nothing in that. I can't remember what it was. and then I had this experience of a few days ago in the park, where I met this American couple because they were playing with their dog, and they're from Nevada, and we spent an hour and a half talking to each other because there's nothing else for anybody to do now, and it was just the most interesting time. And I was the trouble is with persona gap, you can't ask people, oh, by the way, what do you think of me? Now that would have been really interesting if I could have said, what do you think of me? Because I think I might be confusing to you, or that you might be thinking I'm a bit odd. Because they seemed so knowledgeable to me. They were so informed, especially him, about so many things in the world. And I could tell, right, they could perceive, right, that I'm intelligent and, engaged, and they found me engaging. And then there were just these holes in my knowledge, which they didn't have. And all the time I was aware, well, it's because I've spent my adult life doing therapy and learning about therapy. I had to work on that. That's what all my attention and energy has had to go into. And if I were to say anything about that, you would see I've got a lot to offer. But it wasn't appropriate. So I just had this weird experience of kind of like, in a lot of it, I had things to offer, but I knew it's like, phew, it's only because I live here. So I've been around when these historical things have been talked about on the news or the, different telly programs. So I've got things to offer because we happen to be standing where I live and you don't. But you two are really informed. So anyway, it was an interesting experience for me, struggling whilst it's like my most useful hand was tied behind my back. But I couldn't, you can't ask people, can you? By the way, do I seem weird to you? What's the particular way I seem a bit strange to you? Because I could tell the woman in particular, now and then she'd look a bit like, because I experience it as sort of, I'd be going along, joining in, and then a hole would open up. It's like, oops, they're expecting me to know something there, and I don't. There's a gap in my knowledge. And she would look at me a little bit askance or something. Anyway, that was just an interesting experience I had.
Just to relate it, we'll be stopping in a few minutes. Just relating it to some of the other tools we've looked at, particularly if we go back to, day 1 and 2, which was contribution from hurt and purpose, and me saying about those two tools, those two parts of this work, can be the most healing forces around, the most energizing forces around. So it's fairly straightforward there to see that they could give us a lift. Okay. If we come into this material today, and this is the newest part of Pellin, okay? Literally. It's what's called the Pellin lift, and I want it to be our contribution to the tragic world in which we live. And putting the Pellin tools in some form, they can be out there and someone can use them. So it's rather clear, you can see the lift in, say, purpose or contribution from hurt. But I think the lift in the persona gap is taking a risk and getting a really different perception of ourselves, even if it's small. I mean, it wasn't sort of some wow discovery that I could remember where I was 48 years ago. I mean, you know, that's fairly ordinary. But it was a major thing, not a minor thing, to take that in, to remember back to, because there were the literally, I mean, that was the second year of Pellin. And so I think there can be a lift in getting something from other people. Because if you don't mind me taking your example, Nikki, you know, you could ask them, do you think I'm weird? And I reckon what you would get back is, no, I think you're really interesting. I'm a bit intrigued. So the gap, using that word in another way, the bits of knowledge you don't have, okay? That can be sort of really interesting, okay? Yeah.
Well, they might think, that's really interesting. Why has she got that piece of knowledge missing?
Exactly. That's really unconventional.
I was busy doing therapy at the time, you know.
Yeah. Victoria.
Well, using this example, I actually wanted to say to Nikki, when you think or assume for them what they might think, it's not a persona gap, it's still you thinking what they might think. The persona gap would be really listening for them. So next time, maybe it's a good idea to use the opportunity and ask people directly to get this persona gap, because it's still your, the dialogue, but inside you. So it's like a monologue. They might think this. And I actually think that sometimes it's my perception that we don't dare to offer what we have, and the way some things impress people, but like you said, knowledge, what I've understood, like knowledge, knowing some facts or some history, and what it's about the human soul and therapy and everything, which is a completely different way of, sharing knowledge and different type of knowledge. And maybe the way it was interesting for you to hear what they thought or knew, it'll be the same for them. Something completely new, completely different. To meet a crazy, odd English lady in Wimbledon sharing things that are touching emotions and feelings and hurt rather than facts and history. And that would be an interesting experiment.
But the thing that was different for me is that I didn't do that. That it just wasn't relevant. And actually it makes me think, normally just people that I might meet randomly like that, it would normally be in Nero's or something, and it will be because somebody comes up to me and says, what are you writing? Because I'm always writing furiously. And well, it's my journal, it's my therapy, blah blah. So normally I tell people that. And so it was just such an interesting experience for me, and it would have been a big lurch into something completely different. And I just carried on joining them in where they were at, and I did have lots to say about different bits and pieces. I know it was interesting for them. Anyway, it was, like I say, there was a gap. I guess the word gap speaks to me, because I kept falling into a gap. And then that question does come. We don't normally, when do you ever get feedback normally? Unless you say, how am I coming across to you? I would really be interested to know. We don't do that. We don't think of that, do we?
Well, that's the next step. The bit, we'll finish there. The bit I want to do next Sunday is listening, and particularly passive listening. There is a video on the Pellin website on the 7 levels of listening, okay? But our material around listening, in a way, underpins the whole thing. And one of the programs I developed was a therapeutic model for a fostering agency, and it's still a work in progress. I really want to push through the sort of mission statement, or the slogan is just listen, okay? And I think, yeah, and we can't, the tools around listening are crucial to using the tool of the persona gap, which we did today, and the tool of advisors, which we did on Sunday. We end up by just saying our names and our location and anything else we want to say about today. I'll go first. I'm Peter. I'm in Norfolk on the east coast of England. Yeah, I like today. Yeah. I call names because otherwise it tends not to work. Victoria?
Victoria, still in Paris, France.
We can't hear you.
Oh, I said Victoria, still in Paris, France.
Okay. Nikki?
I'm Nikki, Wimbledon, London, England.
And say anything else if you want to.
No, I'm all right for now. I've said a lot of things.
Okay. Elizabeth in Michigan?
I'm Elizabeth Hurwitz. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, USA.
Elizabeth?
Oh, do I have to do something for you to hear me?
No, no.
Oh, I already said, okay.
The other
Elizabeth
Elizabeth.
Hurwitz, Ann Arbor, Michigan, USA.
Yeah. Elizabeth Rosenberg.
Elizabeth Rosenberg. I'm in Eugene, Oregon. This time I actually found it a little challenging to follow the references to material I'm not familiar with.
Okay, thanks for that. Cynthia?
I am Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, which is just a little south of Chicago. And I just kind of want to vent about one persona gap in the United States that's driving me crazy because I've been thinking about it. Is people are thinking, oh, coronavirus is it's somewhere else. It's like, I mean, we've got 1/3 of the cases in the world, and it's everywhere. And we're the hot spot, not other countries. So, sorry, that's just been driving me crazy.
No, the persona gap's got a lot of relevance to, say, how a country sees itself and how other people or nations see that country. Some nice stuff there. Mary in England?
Oh, Mary, south of England. This has brought up a load of stuff for me. I can feel my heart going because some of the worst moments of my life have come about because I haven't understood how I'm coming across to other people until suddenly I get some really negative feedback that throws me completely. So I have got a lot to go away and chew over.
Okay, thanks. Shelley?
Can't hear you.
There we go. Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Shelley from Woodland Hills, California. And I really enjoyed talking about this. And I think that, Nikki, if I was one of those Americans and you asked me for feedback, I would be too polite to say if I really thought you had a gap in knowledge. Right? I wouldn't actually tell you.
Exactly. That's the trouble.
Oh, you're great. I just love it. I love talking to you, you're
Mm.
wonderful person, you know, they're going to be so nice to you, right?
Yeah.
And then afterwards,
Exactly.
they whisper to each other, can you believe it? She didn't even know about blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah.
Yes.
So the thing is that as a therapist, right, we could, if we have an intimate enough relationship with our clients and we ask them for feedback to try and find out if what we're doing is helping them, then maybe they'll be honest with us, right? And even they might not be honest with us. So it's really this challenge, you know, can people give us feedback and then can we take it, right? I'm not good at criticism, right? I'm still learning how to get critical feedback, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Gail?
Yes, I'm Gail. And I'm in Los Angeles still. I haven't left. Can I ask a question? Really a quick question. And it might
Sure.
not be a business, so that would be okay if you say that.
No,
Is
sure.
everybody that's on this Zoom call a therapist?
No.
No.
Okay. I was just
Definitely
curious.
not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was great today. I really got a lot out of the persona gap and the whole thing. It was great. Thank you.
Cease.
Cecilia Yoakum from Tampa, Florida. On a personal level, what helps me most is kind of on the spot feedback from people about a specific thing that just happened, or if we had some kind of misunderstanding. I had one of those the other day with one of my best friends, and what doesn't help me is when somebody says you're such and such. It's way more important if they said, I didn't like the way you handled that situation, or I would have preferred if you did this. So the global description of me doesn't inform me much. And but it's sometimes hard to ask people for that more specific thing. But when we can get into that, it can be very deep and meaningful for me to do that and really tease things out. On a professional level, it is important for me to know whether I'm making a connection with people. And I like one of my favorite people is David Burns, who does a lot about depression, and he sends people home with kind of a questionnaire that they fill out at home. How was that specific session for you? What did you like? What did you didn't like? How they come across there? And they've done research on that, and that's one of the best predictors of positive outcome in counseling, is having that connection be dealt with and looked at, and they talk about it together, and then can work from there. And I think that's sort of the same for me on a personal level, that the best feedback is about what happened just 5 minutes ago, and then we talk about. So, people saying I'm nice doesn't, okay, but that doesn't, that's not very deep or meaningful to me. So that's how I feel about it. Thank you.
Okay. Mary?
Well, I got very excited. Oh, sorry, Mary in Rosarito Beach, Mexico. I got very excited when you said the persona gap, and then I was just really interested, and then I was very excited when it was happening. I could have put my hand up so many more times than I did, because I just love it when. I really find it difficult when people teach and they say, don't say anything until I've finished. I love it that we had that wonderful richness today of people coming in with questions and examples, and I love that level of participation. So today really matched my hopes about it. I really, really enjoyed it today. That's
Okay. Well, we'll finish there. I hope. Thanks for coming. I hope to see you on Sunday. Okay.
Thank you.
Peter?
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you
Peter.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Peter,
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Peter, can I ask a question?
It
Can
was
you talk about
fun.
how you okay. I was going to ask him to talk about himself, what he felt about this.
Oh.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cease, do
Bye.
you want to ask the question? I might be able to answer it, or someone else might.
Well, I was going to ask Peter how he felt about the session. You know, what it brought up for him, or how did he feel like he was doing? Did he, again, along the lines of what I was saying, what are some specific things that were meaningful to you all? You know what I'm saying? So I was going to ask him if he wanted to do that or not, because again, I think saying, well, that was great, it's wonderful, but like some people said, this specific moment meant something to me when this was brought up, is in my mind more of a feedback to somebody. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes complete sense. And I'll just, I just encourage you to maybe approach him privately about that, because that's an interesting question. And I just tell people who may not be aware of it that I don't mean this in any way as a reprimand, but I invited the question. I didn't know it was about Peter, who wasn't here. The part of the Pellin gossip rule is we don't talk about Peter who aren't here. Well, we didn't really talk about him. You just said what you're. I'm saying that for newer people.
No, I wouldn't do that without him here, and it wouldn't be negative. I mean, I would want to have some moments where, anyway, that I can talk to him. Could we give you some positive feedback when this is over, or at the end? You know, what did I get out of it? How did that relate? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, and I like your. That was very useful. That clarification that it is a specific kind of feedback. In its specificness is where we can find the usefulness. So let's finish. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Yes, everybody. Good night. Oh, good. I can close out. I don't want to cut everybody off.
Probably if that happened